by Forming Simulation Technologies. This is a tutorial that's going to focus on the pre-processing capabilities of JSTAMP 2.17. That is to say, everything leading to and including running a simulation. It might be better to say everything except understanding your results. Alright, so without further ado, let's get to it. We're going to start off by going up to File, and we're going to create a new project. This is going to open up a menu after a bit, and we're just going to call this project, SRail. This is going to be closely following an example from the booklet, and if you haven't done this before, it may ask you to select a unit system. We're just going to be working with SIA for this example. It's going to ask you to select a folder to save to. You can really just put this anywhere. And it's going to ask for your CAD file. I'm going to be using, as I mentioned, since the provided example, I'm going to be using something from the sample folder. So sample data, basic, geo, SRail, all two, if you're interested in following along. We're going to skip the project template for now, and we're going to go select a material. So this is what the material library looks like. Once again, if you haven't, it may ask you to select a unit system. If you have some saved materials, they'll be here under the user folder. I don't have any. But for this example, we're just going to go to Papers, Others, and select HS590. So just in case, if you want to make sure your material is the right one, you can hit the Show button here in the bottom left, and it'll open up this menu here, and you can see the thicknesses for the materials, which I'll talk a little bit more on later, the basic properties here on the left, the hardened properties in the middle, and for some of them, you'll also have an included FLD here on the right. All right, so once you've confirmed that and everything looks good, you can just hit Close. I'm just going to select to make sure, and then hit OK. And then now I mentioned the material properties are each going to have a corresponding thickness, which you'll have to select as well. And if you have your own custom imported user materials, they'll also have the same things. So for this example, we're just going to select 0.8, and that's going to be millimeters based off the unit system we selected before. All right, so now we're going to select a project template. And if you don't do this, it might be a little bit inconvenient. This is basically just setting up the steps later on. So for this example, I'm going to be selecting under the master folder Fast and Draw. I'm going to be unchecking Gravity if it is selected here. And you can see in a nice little display here what stages that I'll run through. So I'm going to hit OK here. Everything looks good. Confirm. Hit OK again. It's going to take a bit, and it's going to ask me in a little pop-up window here what I want to do with the CAD data. So this is one of the nice features of JSTAMP. They have a very nice geometry cleanup. So if these checkboxes aren't ticked already, you won't see these, but you can just check them and they'll show up. In the middle here, you can see my healing options. I can delete any tiny edges, narrow faces, and do some automatic face division, all with parameters that I can specify here. And you have to keep in mind the unit system you're using. So that looks good. I'm just going to go with, I think these are the defaults. Hit OK. And it's just going to take a bit. Shouldn't be too long since this isn't a large part. You're going to see a nice display. It's going to check box as it goes along. And a nice little part is going to be created for me here. All right, so just to talk really briefly on some of the interface, you can see any navigation tools for which angle you want to see here. Your axes here in the bottom left, pretty standard. So I can view it. Let's just switch to a nice isometric view for now. And because we imported the template here, you can see the sort of stages here in the upper left. So for this example, I don't want to do any trim work, so I can just right-click that. I could delete the stage, and that would just leave. And you'll notice here, this is kind of like the steps we're going to go through. The trim line step here grays out. So what we're really going to be doing is we're going to be going from left to right here to set up our sort of simulation. So we're going to start by meshing it. We're going to then assign tools. We're going to make a blank mesh, and then we'll set everything up, make sure everything looks right. All right. So now that we're on this screen, we should do exactly what I said, and we should start by setting up the tool mesh. So we're going to select the tool mesh button here, and you'll see it already has the targeted CAD file I've put in there, and this CAD file actually has two layers. One of them is going to be what we want the holder and the die made out of and the punch, and the other one is going to be the blank. So actually the die part is saved in layer 0 here, and the blank part is saved in 1. So we're just going to select 0 for this one. And we're going to try to make the lower surf, which is going to be the punch and the holder first. So I'm going to select lower surf, and I'm going to hit show parameters. This is going to be the sort of detailed information about how your mesh is going to be. So if you aren't satisfied with it, this is something you fiddle around with more. I'm just going to run with the lower settings, and we're just going to hit generate. And that's going to make, there we go, I'm going to change the same view so you can see it, a nice mesh of our lower surf, which is going to be, once again, this middle part's going to be our punch, and this part's going to be our holder. Or if we offset it, you can also think of it as this entire thing being the die. So all right, we've made that lower part. It looks pretty good. But what if we want to verify it, make sure everything looks okay? So we could select it here, and we could hit the Modify tab, and this is going to open up an interface here where we can do some checking using this information on the right. So on some versions, instead of run, this might say check. I don't think it's a big deal at all. And you can tune any of these parameters how you'd like. If you do hit run, you're going to see some information pop up in the bottom left here. We're just going to tell you, well, if anything violated it. And for here, there's no violations. Everything looks good. And another thing, if you want to edit your mesh at all, right, there's the mesh modification panel here. And this is a window you can drag out. I think it might be easier to work with if you do like this. And it's going to have your essential features. And I can click on some of these to show you. This is your generate element. This is your delete element. I think this is your generate node. They're not labeled, and some of them might not be as intuitive as you like. So I believe the split element in particular, it can be a little bit confusing your first time if you're not sure what's going on here. Like, what's that arrow for? And this is one of the things that I think JSTAMP does really well. They have a really nice help feature. So I'm just going to go to the help tab, and I'm going to search divide element. And right here, I got a nice tab here, and you really should give this a read through if you're ever lost. It does a really good job of explaining it and explaining why they've done some things, and it'll make a lot more sense reading through this. All right, but got a little sidetracked there. This is the whole mesh modification panel. You can edit it however you'd like, and once you're done, the end tab is right here in the upper right, a little bit hidden. All right, so we confirmed everything looks good. I don't want to mess with anything, so I'm just going to hit the end tab there. And all right, we got our lower surf here, but we need our punch, right? Okay, so how are we going to do that? We're going to select our mesh here, and we're going to hit the offset button. And you're going to see, I'm going to move it up here so you can see it better. It offers us two different offset types. So our nodal offset and our element offset type. And the images do a nice job of kind of illustrating the difference. For this one, we're going to use our element offset. And keep in mind your units. We're just going to leave it here 0.8. And I'm just going to offset it by that much. And you can see if I zoom in on it here, a little bit on the movement. Scroll wheel can zoom in and out, but it won't zoom in and out on where your mouse cursor is, only the center of the screen. If you hold Shift and right mouse, that gives you a little move command. There's also a bunch of movement options in the toolbar, but I think you can largely get by just using those two. You can see I've created two surfaces and they're offset by just the slightest amount. I'll zoom in even more on it there so you can see it. So that's my nice offset there. All right, so moving on, we've created our parts, but now we need to assign them, right? Next, we're going to go to our Tool Assign tab. All right, and we can see here in the upper right, I have my die, my punch, and my holder. So we can just assign these as we go along. All right, so I'm going to start by trying to assign my die, and that's going to go on the upper face. So I'm just going to select the upper tab here on the right. And if I switch between those, you can see the little bit of jumping. That's the small offset there. All right, so I've selected the upper thing, and well, what do I need to select? You'll notice my cursor changes to have the little S. That does mean I'm ready for a selection. So I can just click right here on the mesh, and you'll see it turns red, and I'll hit the sign here, and it'll be assigned. And you'll see this button will be grayed out, and it'll have clear assign, and the sign will say OK. All right, so next I need to assign my punch and my holder, right? Why don't we start with a holder? And you can see it won't let me select the upper one again, so it doesn't want you to select the same part and make that mistake. So I'm going to switch my lower here, and I can't select the entire thing because then I'll get the middle bit again, so I can't do by part. I actually have to do by CAD face. Or you could also do it by element or some other ways, but I think this is the easiest way. And the holder is just going to be everything but this middle bit, so I'm just going to select that. And you'll notice they all turn red corresponding to me. And that looks good to me, so I'm just going to hit assign. And then if I try to, you'll notice it goes OK, the button grays out. And then I'm going to select my punch. Looks like everything's good. I'm just going to select by part again, select the middle bit, turns red. And everything is assigned and everything says OK here. All right, so that looks pretty good. And actually, if you look on the left here, it tells you a little bit of what you still have to do to set this up. So my die, punch, and holder all went from being red to black to kind of show they're assigned. And you can see the things I have yet to assign are still red. So the next thing we should do is why don't we set up the blank mesh? So I'm going to go over to the next tab here. And you'll see everything I have before that window kind of closed. I'm going to import, as I mentioned before, layer 1. I'm going to change the view a bit here so you can see it. And this is the blank mesh that came with the CAD file I imported before. All right, so before we import that, we do want to say what size we want it. I'm just going to go for 1.8, and we're going to do a trim type of 1. and we can just try to generate that. And there we go. We have a nice blank mesh that's generated. And you also notice up here in the upper left, instead of being red, it's filled in with some blank text. So we're one step closer to setting up our simulation. All right. So next, why don't we continue along this list? And here, if we click on that blue button between the die and the draw, we'll open up the tool action setting. And here I'm just going to uncheck BH stroke and then hit OK. So you'll notice there's a lot of customization options here for each of these. Definitely if you're running something specialized, it's a menu that could be immensely useful. But just running down this list, I'm going to select the holder and draw, and I'm just going to change the max here to 49,000. And I'm also going to come down here, I'll bring it up a bit, and change the cushion distance here to 40 millimeters. All right, and you'll see that's another step that's switched from red. And the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open the Draw tab here, and I'm going to hit the Friction Coefficient tab, and I'm going to change this to 0.1. And you can see you can also set the friction coefficient for each tool if that's something you're interested in. All right, so now that we've done that, we've set up the blank mesh, we've assigned all the tools, we're going to head to the last tab, our Setup tab. All right, so we're going to select our Draw, and we're going to see a couple of status availables here. Once we've selected our draw, we can just go ahead and hit build up. That's going to give us, well, try to show us a little bit of what we're trying to do. Expand this window so it's easier to see. And is going to switch to say completed here. This might take a little bit longer depending on how complex what you're trying to run is. What we're going to do is we're going to check these two boxes saying show stroke direction and show loading direction. And what we can do is we can actually drag the slider, and it'll show us a little bit of what the simulation is going to try to do. So it's not actually running the simulation, it's just to make sure you have everything in place, that things are going the way you want them to go. All right, so next what we're going to do is we're going to go to the upper left here, and we're going to hit the execution tab under the forming stage flow panel. That's going to open up this menu here. It might not show what all these mean. You can just kind of expand these tabs just to make sure you have the right ones tabbed. I'm going to check mark the input and analysis tab here for the draw, and confirm that that's all good, and I'm just going to hit execute. All right, so what should normally happen here is you'll have a little terminal pop up, and everything, if it goes as intended, you'll have a normal termination pop up, and then you can just hit any button to close out of that, and then you can just close out of everything, and you should have everything set up. If you learned something from this video, consider supporting the channel by subscribing. And if you have any further questions, you can find contact info at formingsimulation.com. Please join me in the next video where we'll go over the post-processing capability of JSTAMP.